Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and before we get into today's hot topic, make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this video so everyone can stay informed about the latest political storms shaking the region. Now, South Africa has found itself at the center of an unexpected diplomatic firestorm, and this time it's not about domestic politics, but about comments that have sparked both outrage and confusion. The country's ministers are slamming none other than the chief of the South African National Defence Force, who made remarks suggesting South Africa stands in solidarity with Iran. And believe me, this isn't just another political squabble, this is a serious situation that touches on military integrity, international relations, and South Africa's already delicate position on the global stage. The storm began when General Radzoni Mafwanya, the SANDF chief, made statements during an international event that many took to mean South Africa was publicly siding with Iran. He spoke about the shared struggles and mutual understanding between South Africa and Iran, describing the nations as partners in resistance against global injustice. While on the surface it may have sounded like diplomatic courtesy, the undertones were immediately picked up by political analysts, opposition leaders, and even senior government officials. The comments were made against the backdrop of increasing global tensions involving Iran, particularly with Western nations and Israel, and this is what made the statement so explosive. The backlash inside South Africa's cabinet was immediate. Several ministers have privately and publicly expressed deep dissatisfaction, calling the remarks reckless and unilateral. They argue that the SANDF chief overstepped his mandate. The military, in a democratic system, is not supposed to define foreign policy. That's the job of the elected government, specifically the presidency and the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, DIRCO. One senior minister, speaking off the record, reportedly said, "We cannot afford to be dragged into conflicts or alliances we have not formally adopted as national policy." These kinds of statements can have serious repercussions for our trade, diplomacy, and security. The issue is even more sensitive because South Africa has been trying to balance its foreign policy between its historical ties with liberation movements and its trade relationships with both the West and the East. The ANC government has always prided itself on its stance of non-alignment, meaning it does not take sides in global conflicts but rather positions itself as a mediator and a voice for peace. But Mafwanya's remarks seem to throw that principle out the window. Instead of sounding like a neutral call for justice, they sounded like a direct political endorsement of Iran, a country that is currently in the crosshairs of many powerful states. Critics warn that such statements could risk South Africa being viewed as hostile by Western powers, which might result in economic consequences, such as reduced investment or even sanctions. It's not far-fetched when you consider how geopolitics works. Even a perceived alliance with a sanctioned state can lead to financial and diplomatic blowback. Business leaders are reportedly concerned, saying that if international investors believe South Africa is taking sides in volatile global conflicts, it could harm trade relations and investor confidence. Opposition parties have wasted no time in capitalizing on the controversy. The Democratic Alliance has already called for an urgent parliamentary inquiry, arguing that the SANDF chief must account for why he made statements of such magnitude without government authorization. Action SA and other smaller parties have echoed the sentiment, saying that the military leadership must be reminded of its constitutional role and boundaries. In their view, this is not just a slip of the tongue, it's a breach of professional conduct that risks dragging South Africa into unnecessary diplomatic quarrels. Interestingly, within the ANC itself, the reaction has been mixed. Some veterans of the liberation struggle see nothing wrong with expressing solidarity with Iran, given that Iran supported certain liberation movements during apartheid. They frame it as a matter of historical gratitude and mutual respect. However, the younger, more pragmatic wing of the ANC argues that while history is important, the realities of today's global political climate demand a more cautious and strategic approach. They point out that South Africa's economy is fragile, unemployment is at crisis levels, and the country cannot afford to alienate key trading partners in pursuit of ideological nostalgia. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation has tried to control the damage. In a carefully worded statement, DIRCO emphasized that South Africa remains committed to its non-aligned foreign policy stance and that any remarks made by individuals should not be interpreted as official government policy unless formally stated by the presidency or DIRCO itself. This was essentially a diplomatic way of saying, what he said does not represent us, without outright embarrassing the SANDF chief. But the controversy is far from over. Foreign diplomats in Pretoria have reportedly been making discreet inquiries, wanting to know if Mafwanyu's comments indicate a shift in policy or if they were simply personal views. In international relations, perception is everything, and even the hint of a policy shift can lead to real-world consequences. Iran itself has responded warmly to the remarks, with Iranian state media praising South Africa's encouraged and principled stance, which only adds fuel to the fire for critics who say the damage is already done. For ordinary South Africans, the incident raises deeper questions. Who really controls the narrative of the country's foreign policy? Is it the politicians elected to represent the people, or do high-ranking military officials have the freedom to speak as they please on the world stage? In a time when South Africa is already navigating complex relationships with BRICS partners like China and Russia while trying to maintain strong trade with Europe and the US, a single controversial statement can throw everything into disarray. The coming days will be critical. There are whispers that the president may summon General Mafwanyu for a private meeting to clarify the remarks and remind him of the constitutional boundaries of his office. If this happens, it will signal that the government is serious about avoiding any further diplomatic embarrassment. However, if the matter is quietly swept under the rug, it could set a precedent for other military leaders to speak out on foreign affairs without oversight, something that could cause even bigger problems down the road. What's clear is that this incident is not just about one man's words, it's about South Africa's place in an increasingly polarized world. The balance between historical loyalties and modern geopolitical realities is becoming harder to maintain, and this controversy is a reminder that in politics, even a few sentences can set off a chain reaction far beyond what anyone intended. The country's leaders now have to walk a fine line between repairing any diplomatic damage and asserting control over how South Africa's voice is represented on the global stage. This is one of those moments where the world is watching, and how Pretoria handles it could shape perceptions for years to come.